Welcome back to the podcast for 2024. Thank you for staying with us through the end of 2023, and we are really excited to get back into all the fabulous content this year, and we are kicking off with a banger of an episode. We're kicking off another installment of our Out Athlete series. This time I am talking to Madeline FitzRoy, who is an out trans woman in 10-pin bowling. Now, if you remember my episode with Jamie Carroll, that was the first in the Out episode series, I actually called out Madeline and said, "Hey, Madeline, we would love to have you on the podcast. We'd love to chat to you a little bit more about your experiences as being an openly out trans athlete." And she is making great strides in the sport. I hope you are going to love this episode as much as I loved sitting down with Madeline. I'm your host, Dion Alexander, and you're listening to Our Pride by Mr Gay Pride Australia. Welcome back, first podcast of the year. I have a very special guest today. I have a trans 10-pin bowling athlete, Madeline FitzRoy. Madeline FitzRoy, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me.
Not a problem at all. Now, I did put a shout out on the podcast when I was doing the podcast with Jamie Carroll. So if you haven't checked out that episode, shameless plug right here. I'm all about a shameless plug. Then go check that one out. But you've answered the call and now you're here.
It was very good. I really enjoyed that one. So I thought, yeah, well, you did put out the call. So here I am on the couch.
You have. You and on the couch indeed. A 3-hour drive from Canberra this morning. So very committed. So I thank you for that. And I'm really interested. And I just want to have a chat to you today and help you tell your story and just put a bit more information out there, which would be great. So I think maybe get started for those that don't know you and a little bit of your background. If you just want to tell us a little bit about yourself, how you like to be identified as, and how you got into 10-pin bowling as well, I think would be great.
Okay, well, start at the beginning. I've been 10-pin bowling since I was probably 14 when Old Woden 10-pin bowl first opened. Mum and Dad were keen 10-pin bowlers, so I got into it then, and then did a lot of bowling as a junior. We went to a lot of inter-centres, come up to Sydney with a group of guys, or group of kids. And then I think in '86 I went to my first nationals, not in the President's Shield team. That was at Rushcutters Bay.
Yep.
Just a first experience. I did it right there. And then in '87 and '88 we went to I made the President's Shield team.
Yep.
And we bowled, I think, in Rockhampton in '87, and then in Melbourne we bowled. That was President's Shield in Melbourne, the boys team, obviously the boys team back then. That was down in Melbourne, and then bowled a few more years then. But all of a sudden you're 18, 19, you've got to start paying for bowling yourself. Bowling's an expensive sport, so I was in and out of it for a while. I think in '92. 92 or 94, I sort of came back for another 12 months and did okay. I made the Rockaway team then, but had to pull out mostly for financial reasons.
Yep.
And then I took a long time off. Just took a long time off. I think I didn't come back until 2014, maybe. But then my children, I had actually had children. I've got 3 kids, a boy and 2 girls. So I came back in 2014. I made the Rockaway team then.
Yep.
But again, I was going through a lot, I suppose, at that time. There was a divorce and that sort of stuff and other bits and pieces. So I got out of it.
Yep.
But now I'm back and I'm really enjoying it.
That's awesome.
I won't be quitting for any length of time now.
Yeah, good.
Kind of stuck with me.
Yeah. Excellent. And we love being stuck with you. So that's good.
Thank you very much.
I do find it fascinating, and very interesting. I was putting the 2 words together. First podcast for the year. So I can't even say podcast yet. But a lot of people that I talk to have a break from bowling for a while. Now, what age did you first have that first break?
I think it was pretty soon after, junior-ish.
Yep.
Because again, all of a sudden your parents aren't supporting you for your bowling. You've got to support yourself. And bowling back then, bowling balls were about the same price as they are now.
Yeah.
But, you know, a $200 bowling ball back then was a lot of money. Right
Yes.
now it's $200. It's not so much. So, and even, I mean, game fees were a lot better back then, and you could practice some of the more independent centres and those sorts of things too, which made it a bit easier. But mostly with the travel and those sorts of things, I just couldn't afford it. So, as I said, I took the time off. I did come back for that 1 year.
Yep.
I think I might have actually started working at Woden 10-pin bowl, which sort of got me back into it a little bit then. But that only lasted for a short amount of time. And then again, my children sort of took up a lot of my time, a lot of my that sort of stuff and energy. So then I took that other break until 2014, 2015. But I wasn't really enjoying it. I did have a lot of other stuff going on. Work was very busy. So yeah, I got out of it then. But once I transitioned, all my junior life as a kid, all of the time, I always felt like I was, I don't want to be here. I want to be over there. I want to be bowling with the girls, that sort of stuff. I couldn't do that. So then post-transition, I've really sort of come out of my shell and really started to enjoy my life a lot more. Not that it always looks like that on the lanes, but now I can really experience what I didn't get as a kid. So that's what I'm out there doing now, and I'm really, really enjoying it. It's just, again, it doesn't always look like I'm enjoying it on the lanes, but that's 10-pin bowling. So
well, sport is very frustrating.
Exactly.
And I have to say, as a 10-pin bowler, we'll go put former in there. Former 10-pin bowler.
Well, we're
myself.
still trying to get you back. We want you back.
I've got to be a Pride Monarch, don't
that's
I?
right. Exactly right. Exactly. If we can get a Pride Monarchs team into the TBA, that would be awesome. So,
it would be. It would be. So I want to sort of dive into. I want to park just for the moment, sort of post-transition and sort of what I've seen sort of flourished over the last couple of years, which has been awesome. Go back to sort of your junior days when you were involved in the sport. How was that for you? Now, obviously, you've said that you always looked over at the girls and was like, I think I should be over there. Sort of what age did you start to feel like that, the gender you'd been born with wasn't your identity?
I don't know that I really understood what I was going through. Back when I was a kid, you didn't have access to the information you have access to now. I just knew there was something different about me. I wanted to do different things. I wanted to dress different ways. And I couldn't do that. I grew up in a very strict family. So I didn't feel I certainly couldn't express myself outwardly. I didn't feel, but I could do it inwardly. So I spent a lot of time to myself, doing things to make me feel better, to try and get things through. But the flip side of that is, for me and some other my trans friends, you then take on that very masculine persona. So you become very outwardly into other sports or other physical activities to try and hide what you need to, so you can then do what you need to do in your private life. So, so I always knew I was different. I just didn't know what or why. I think I'm not really sure when I discovered the internet or information on the internet, but I did, and that started to tell me little bits and pieces about what I was doing, and I thought that was it was one thing, but then there was an event that happened in my life that I needed to go speak to someone, and I thoroughly recommend to anybody, if you have problems in your life, really do seek out that professional help. It really does help. So I did that, and then we touched on some bits and pieces, and she sort of knew what was there, but she wasn't experienced, so she put me back in contact with someone else. Spoke to a lady called Tashara, Dr. Tashara. And then from there, I went and met another doctor, and just all these doors just opened. The floodgates opened, and I knew from probably the 10 minutes into talking to Tashara, this is exactly what I was. This is where my brain doesn't work the way I think it should, and everything just downhill, but in a good way downhill. It's just nice and easy. So,
Felt right.
Absolutely. And I went from having one idea of what I was, but then to knowing what I was.
Yes.
It was, and that's, it was like a massive big, not the whole, metaphorical weight off my shoulders and that sort of stuff, but I just understood myself. And from that, all of a sudden, rather than being an angry, cranky male, I was just less cranky. So, I mean, you still have those things, and especially when, as a trans person, you sort of do struggle with hormone levels and that sort of stuff. So I can know when my hormones are wrong because I can feel my moods going.
Yes.
Well, hang on a sec, I need to sort of adjust those.
So
certainly that has really, really helped my life. Like I've just, as you say, you've seen me flourish in the last 2 years. I really have just become this much happier, much more open, and I'm enjoying my life a lot more. So
I just think that's like fantastic that we're here on this planet way too little amount of time, right? It's too short. Life's too short, and so I just think people just need to enjoy themselves, and we need to create an environment where people can just be who they want to be and just live their life authentically.
It's no one else's business. Like I'm just me doing my thing. I'm not there to take advantage or anything like that. I'm just there being me and having a great time about it.
That is awesome. So how long would it have been? Like, what age were you when you then saw these doctors and you started then to piece everything together?
So what am I now? Oh my God. I think I first started the second time. So there was a period maybe when in my late 40s where I wanted to speak to my doctor.
Yep.
And he was a very good doctor and very close family friend. And I said, look, this is what I think I want to do. And he said, I have no idea what to do about that sort of stuff. So, but I'll put you in contact with this doctor. And the only thing that doctor had was that she was trans herself.
Yep.
And so I thought, and I ummed and ahed about it a long time. My children were still a little young. I was still developing my career and that sort of stuff. And I just wasn't really super sure because I knew that doing that was going to open some other doors and make some other things difficult. So I just wasn't really sure. It wasn't until I was 50 and this thing happened, and we won't touch on that, but that was the catalyst. But in that intervening period, my home life really did start to change. I was very much becoming a different person. I didn't call myself Madeline back at that stage. I didn't choose that name until much later. But I had created an alias and that sort of stuff for online, and when I was trying to email and that sort of stuff. So in that period, I really did a lot of research and was learning on a similar but not quite the same route. And then once I found these doctors, I thought, well, hang on a sec, this is it. And then, so it was probably 45 to 50 was when it was really, really gathering steam. I was becoming more confident in myself too, and more confident in my ability to cope with what I would need to do to change. And same with work. I work in a very masculine field. I'm not sure if people know, but I'm a police officer. So unfortunately, or fortunately, however you want to look at it, it's a very male-dominated area. And I was, or am, a very well-respected police officer. So for me to want to do that in that area I knew was going to be quite difficult. No, I perceived it to be quite difficult. It turned out that I was 100% wrong. It has been the smoothest of sailing. So in that period, I did a lot of research, a lot of learning. And then when it came time to make this final decision, it became very, very simple.
Now, I just wanted to rewind on that. So you've said 45 to 50. And you spoke about having thoughts of I should be with the girls bowling. So that's a 20, almost 30-year period.
And there's 25 years worth of clothing choices hidden away in cupboards and that sort of stuff that I would do in private, because I certainly couldn't do it in public. There were partners who knew what I was trying to do, or the sensations I was trying to get from my life. So there were plenty of partners who knew, and I think even maybe in in the 90s when I was working at the bowling alley. This is really outing myself here, but there was a very drunken night. We had a Christmas party, or we had some sort of party at the bowling alley.
Yep.
And I probably said way too much, but a lot of people found out some stuff then.
Yep.
And to my surprise, they were all, oh, well, whatever, you do you. And so they didn't care. So that was quite pleasant, because you're hiding all this stuff and you have all that anxiety about, oh, people find out. And then when they did, they've gone, oh, well, whatever, you're just you, keep on, let's move on. So, yeah, so that was a bit embarrassing. But, yeah, that was probably the first time I told anyone what I was doing, or that I felt different, or I needed to do certain things to make myself feel better. So, yeah.
It's such a long time. And, you know, something else that I just picked up from what you're saying is, like, did a lot of research in trying to find out, like, who you were.
Yeah.
And I just don't, like, from a heteronormative perspective, I just don't think that happens for people. Like, they don't go and they don't, like, research, what am I feeling, or they don't, you know, they go and talk about you know, how they're feeling to a psychologist or a psychiatrist, if that they need to do that, or a mental health professional. But, you know, to really dive into, like, you know, a different personality and, you know, a different identity. I just think, like, hearing that, I was like, that is just a lot of work that a lot of people don't have to do.
Yeah, well, yeah. I mean, I think it was a lot of work. It was a lot of research, a lot of learning, but it was good for me, because I was able to quantify what I was feeling, and understand myself better, and with more understanding of myself, more acceptance. I'm not weird. I'm not a freak. This is just normal. There are lots of other people who feel exactly the same way you do. So yeah, that the research became like the comforter, if you like, of that you are actually a normal person. You're not some sort of weirdo. So, and because you have that, I felt was strange. I felt isolated as a kid, felt isolated as a teenager, because, well, I don't know anyone like me.
Yes.
I mean, yeah, I know the guys and I know the girls and I know that, but there's no one like me as far as I was concerned. So, I was just the only one. It's not until you start to get into the community, or you start to do research, that you realise that there are thousands and thousands of people exactly the same, and probably all having the same learning experiences that you are. The good thing nowadays is that these kids who are having these issues have people to talk to. They have the internet to look up, and they can go, oh, that's me. And they're starting to realise this younger. And oh my God, if I had only realised what I knew now, then I would have transitioned way earlier. I mean, I don't wish that, because I've got 3 beautiful children who I love very, very much. I've got a great career, and I've got a good family and that sort of stuff. So all that might have changed if I transitioned early. So my journey is what it is, and I'm very, very happy with what it was. But yes, of course, like most trans people, I wish I'd come out when I was 10, so that I didn't have, you know, a deep voice and a hairy face and those sorts of things. But, you know, nothing's insurmountable these days. So yeah. No,
not at all. And I just, you look at it back then, and you didn't have access to the internet.
Absolutely.
And especially you're talking about 80s and 90s. And I think too, you know, being in Canberra,
small community,
like you run off percentages, and maybe only 1 or 2 other people potentially that would be like you living in Canberra. You know, I always think it's a bit different in Sydney. You know, when I moved to Sydney, I think that my life changed, and, you know, my identity as a gay person changed, and I got to experience different things. So that's always really good, and really helps you build who you are as a person.
Absolutely,
but, to not have that around, and not have sort of those people around as well, is always quite difficult.
Just not have people to understand you. Like, it's just, and I think for me I think if I'd reached out to people, more people would have been understanding. I mean, if you think back to when I said I outed myself when I was that drunken thing, I think if I'd reached out then, more people would have been more supportive than I thought. But you still have the stigma around it, that sort of stuff. So, you know, I don't regret anything of that sort of stuff, other than maybe not exploring it more then. But again, if I did that, then things wouldn't be the way they are now. And I'm very, very happy with how things are now. So
excellent. What was it like during that transition period? Like, and it's not sort of, if you can as much as you want to share, just share sort of what it means to transition, because it's not like you go, right, I've decided that, you know, I'm trans and I'm gonna, you know, transition to the gender that I, you know, believe. It's like I don't wake up tomorrow and that all happens.
No. So for me, I guess I want to say I'm very regimented, but I'm not. I'm just process driven and want to look after myself and my own, not my own needs, but I want to look after myself, look after the people around me. I didn't want to hurt anyone. But when I realised who I was and what I was planning on doing, I decided that my very first decision was I'm going to do this privately.
Yeah.
There are things that trans people do to make themselves feel better, and I planned that out. And then I needed to see psychologists and those sorts of things, and get permission, which I think is an abomination, but that's what you need to do. So I had planned that I was just going to transition, but do everything privately.
Yep.
And at home, I'd live my life as a woman, and outwardly, I'd live my life as a man. So I'd spoken to my doctor and my psychologist, and they both agreed that I was mentally capable of making that decision. Well, they weren't necessarily agreeing that that was the best way to handle things. They thought that was the best way to handle things in my particular situation. Yep. So I then had to go and see a second psychologist for the process. And my first psychologist gave her a whole lot of information. Now, she told me that you would just go see this psychologist one time, and she would then tick it off, and we could then proceed with everything else we needed to do. So I go to see this lady, and at the very start of it, I said, you know, I'm just here to get this ticked off, blah, blah, blah. And this should only take, you know, one session. And she said, oh, no, we could be 4 or 5 sessions to make this decision. I'm like, oh, okay. In that intervening period, and because she said, because, you know, you want to do this hidden away, you want to do it, and I'm not really sure I understand that. You want to live one life and 2 lives and that sort of stuff. But in that intervening period, I decided that, hang on a sec, if I do that, all I'm really doing is reversing what I'm doing now. Now I'm living as well. Now I'm privately doing it. I don't want to do that. I want to be 100% in this.
Yes.
And I'd made that decision, and we sat down with her. I said, well, that's what I had thought, but it's been 4 or 5 weeks since I left my last appointment. I've had a lot of time to think about this. I don't want that. I want to make these steps. I want to be doing this. I want to be out. I want to be proud. I want to be me 24/7. And by the end of that session with that lady, she said, well, you clearly know what you're doing. And off she signed, and off I went. So it was awesome.
Did only take one session.
It did only take one session, absolutely. Because I knew exactly what I wanted. I knew the consequences of what I was going to do. I think by that stage, I'd probably already spoken to my children, and they were, okay, cool, what's for dinner? They didn't honestly, and that's how I describe it quite often. They go, oh, well, whatever, you know, let's keep on going. They don't care at all. They've been 100% supportive. So,
have you found that a lot, particularly while you're in that transition stage and you're making, you know, changes in your life, and obviously, you know, when you're going through those changes, it starts to be at some stage some visible changes to outsiders. Yeah. Has everyone been supportive, or have you found people, you know, there's some, I think, potentially some ignorance or some...
To my face and to my knowledge, everyone has been super supportive.
Yep.
I am 100% sure there are people who are not supportive.
Yep.
In my workplace, 1000% super supportive and helped me all the way along. But also I do know that in the background there have been some other people who have been a bit concerned. Like my process with my operation was such that I'd spoken to my bosses, and we'd made a plan of how we were going to do this, because it's a big thing, it's a bit confusing. I work with, in my office, there's a lot of women and a lot of men. So there's bathrooms and that sort of stuff. And I knew there was going to be some sort of issues, because some of them are a little bit older and a bit concerned. So the plan was that I was going to go away for 6 weeks as I was going to leave as Brett and come back as Madeline.
Yep.
And I'd have 6 weeks off to do recovery from that sort of stuff. But then the surgeon broke his finger.
Oh, God.
Scared us. What was he surfing? Broke his finger surfing, because I couldn't do my operation. So I then had to come back. But I'd already sort of said I'm going to be coming back as Madeline. So there's really only this 2-week period where they had to where they had to adjust rather than the 6 weeks.
Yep.
So I came back, and in that period, I used the male bathroom, but addressed was Madeline. So that was sort of the getting to know period.
Yeah.
Then I went off, and I had my 6 weeks off, and I came back, and I said to my boss, well, look, they've had plenty of time. I'm now back as Madeline. I'm going to be working in this capacity. Everyone just has to accept it. And he went, well, I would have made them do that before.
Well, yeah.
So it wasn't a problem. So yeah, so it's been, work has been very, very simple, very, very easy. So, and my children too. I mean, and even the bowling fraternity have been largely accepting. I mean, again, I'm sure there are people in the background, the faceless people in the background.
The keyboard warriors,
warriors, who don't want to face you. That they're in the background and they say stuff.
Yeah.
But largely, I have been accepted fully, especially by the elite females who I'm bowling against, have been amazing to me. I can't thank them enough for their acceptance. It's just, it's been amazing.
How did you feel when you were coming back into bowling and you're coming now as a trans athlete and you're participating in competing in the women's section? Did you have any doubts? Did you have any anxiety around it? Like, what were you feeling going into doing that?
No, because I didn't. Because the lead up was, and I'd been bowling league as Madeline.
Yep.
And everyone was just going, oh, that's Madeline, she's bowling league. And I bowled a lot of, I bowled a couple of regional events as Madeline as well. And I'd been given the 8 points, 8 pins and that sort of stuff. So I was already sort of doing it. So I wasn't anticipating anything.
Yes.
I think the very first tournament, like ranked tournament I was coming, was the New South Wales Open.
Yep.
And that's when I think Michael Craig said, oh, we sort of need to dot our I's and cross our T's just to find out. So I don't really remember the process, but I think I reached out to TBA, and then I understand now. I didn't know then, but I understand now that they reached out to you to find out how you felt, which was kind of ironic. But as it turned out, I bowled there and I made the cut, and on the second day I didn't do very well, but that sort of was the start of it. So then I guess the decision by that stage was made. TBA had made a decision, in my mind anyway, that I was going to be allowed to bowl in the female events and that I would continue on doing that.
Yeah, yes. It
wasn't until this year that something reared its ugly head, and I had no idea that this was a problem. Like I bowled, by the time this year's Nationals came around, I had bowled New South Wales Open, and I bowled Sun City Women's, FIC 150, I think 2 seniors events, all in the female division. So I just didn't anticipate any problems.
Yep.
So I'm not sure if we were going down this road, but
no, for sure. And probably something I want to ask about too, because I think it does show not ignorance. Ignorance is probably not the right word, but I think sporting organisations too often have absolutely no idea about this space.
Absolutely.
And very much sport has always been male and female. It's been very delineated down the middle. And I know it's a very contentious issue about trans athletes, particularly, one way more than the other. Yeah. So, anyone that was physiologically born a male that's transitioned into a female, participating in the female division always seems to cop a lot more than the other way around, which is unfortunate. But I did receive a phone call, and I think that, I just want to share that again because I think it just shows where some sports, and probably I would think most sports, just don't know where to go with it.
Yep.
So I don't think it's ignorance. I actually think it's not being exposed to it, and it's not actually then going and investing the money and finding out what needs to happen and what causes advantages in certain sports. I say this all the time, like, you compete, you don't want to be seen to be having some sort of unfair advantage.
Absolutely not.
No one does.
No.
When you compete, you want to win, and when you win, you want everyone to know that it was because you were good and you were the best on the day, and that's it. But they did TBA did ring me. So TBA is the national sporting organisation for Tempe bowling. They rang me and they're like, we've got this scenario. And I think it was more from whatever you do, like, you're going to have to back it up. So as long as you're comfortable with it. And I was like, I'm comfortable with that.
And this is the thing that I find interesting about TBA, and TBA have been great to me. They've really been very, very supportive to a point. And I think this is part of the problem. They're the national sporting body. They make the rules. They don't ring the tournament director and say, oh, do you know, how do you feel about this? They go, this is what we've decided. This is what you're going to do.
Yeah.
Which is what didn't happen when we come up to the nationals.
Yes.
We have a promoter who is then dictating to the governing body how the rules will be enforced.
Of course, yeah.
And to me, that was what? What? Like, imagine if the Tennis Australia said to, we're going to have the tennis tournament, and then the promoter of the I can't even get the words out.
Well, it's like the United Cup now at the moment in Sydney that's happening. They basically turn around and say, like, this is the way it's going to be.
That's right. The promoter doesn't dictate to the event or to the sporting body the rules of the game.
No.
And that's what's happened. Like, TBA ring you to say, how do you feel? Really, they should be saying, just letting you know, we've made this decision. She can bowl in the females. And you go, oh, okay, that wasn't a scenario I understood, but that's fine. No problem, because you're the sporting body and I'm going to be running the event. And that's what I felt should have happened leading into the Nationals this year, but didn't. Fortunately, I went into a, okay, what do I do now? So I just started making some phone calls and writing some letters, and eventually I got them to change their decision. And to their credit, they were both, I've tried to remember then, Ashley and Mark were really, really nice while we were there.
Yeah.
I do think they probably gave me a lot of lip service.
Yep.
And I think that's probably business related, so that they continued on with their business, and that's fair enough. They've got a business to run. Their other events is a multi-million-dollar event each year, and they don't want to lose that. So they had to, I think they had to do what they were doing with me. So, so they were very, very nice. Mark's a very nice person. Ashley's a nicer person than I was expecting. So in the end, the right thing happened, and I was able to compete, and I competed very well. I was very, very lucky. So,
do you think, like, obviously that event was down in Tasmania, and again, much smaller city. Do you think that potentially that was influencing their decision in that there was a lack of exposure?
I think they were naive. To be honest, Ashley and Mark, I think they were naive to the strong community that they have down there, because I found Rodney Kroom, I hope that's his name, and he is a massive advocate for inclusion in sport. Huge, and he's all over the country and that sort of stuff. And I sent him an email, and he called me not 5 minutes after getting the email to say, this isn't right. This is what we're going to do. Put me in touch with a solicitor, did this. He said, you should write to these government agencies and that sort of stuff. So emails went out, and it was all sorted out. But Tasmania has this massive, big support network for the community. So, and it's all in inclusion. I think, I'm not sure about other states, but Tasmania was possibly the worst state for them to try and pull this off. So I think they were just naive in that they didn't realise. They thought they could do it, and they could dictate it, because Ashley has her views, and she's totally entitled to those views. They're wrong, of course, I think, but she's entitled to have those. She's not entitled to enforce them on a sporting body, like I've said before. But so I was able to get the support I needed to get that changed. So that was really, really good. And as I said, when I got down there, they were super nice to me. So,
how do you find it is dealing with people that have views like Ashley's?
Ashley and Mark are the only people Ashley's the only person who's really shown me views that I didn't that align with mine. I've never had that from other people. I've never walked into a female's toilet and been grunted at or anything like that, or told I shouldn't be in here, or anything like. I haven't had those negative experiences. I have been, and I'm sure that's lucky. I mean, I know there are trans people out there who have had those experiences. I just haven't. I've been super lucky. So,
it's like refreshing and fantastic to hear, because you do hear some absolute horror stories. And I think, I think at the end of last year too, started to see a lot of world sporting organisations start to change their, not change their stance on it, but really put it into policy around excluding trans women from participating and competing in the women's events.
One of the more interesting sports to do that is to have excluded trans females is chess.
Yes, I was actually on on the Rainbow Advocate on Joy, and yeah, the presenter was very much like, Evelyn was very much like, why are we excluding
chess?
Chess, like what advantage can there possibly be? Because a lot of, and I have to say, this is what I hear. So correct me if I'm wrong, but a lot of why people think that trans women should be excluded from women is the physiological side of things, right? So then you go into a sport like chess, and then I go, well, your argument now doesn't stack up anymore, does it?
There's no argument for chess at all. And the physiological one, I sort of can understand in some sports and not others, like in darts or snooker. There's not really much physical sport, much physical
demand
that sort of stuff. But in football or in tennis, it is more. Bowling sort of fits in the middle, where there's, there is some power, but there's also finesse. There's also, so it's sort of in the middle, and even more so, I sort of fit into the middle too. I don't have a massive rev rate, but yes, I have a higher rev rate than some girls. Not all. There are girls out there who rev the ball harder than me, and certainly as they come through, the two-handed girls are all going to out-rev us all. So those sorts of things are changing in the sport anyway. So while some trans people have a stronger physique, not all of them do. And the flip side of that is hormones have taken away a lot of that from me.
Yes.
When I was not taking estrogen and not testosterone blockers, I was physically stronger. I'm certainly not that anymore. So then if you ban me from female events, well, I'm now disadvantaged in male events too. So where do I fit? There's not like there's a trans leg in bowling.
Well, and this is part of what I don't think people understand either, because a lot of people are like, well, no, you weren't born female, so you shouldn't be allowed to be in there because of, I've read X, Y, and Z online. And anyway, I don't think anyone's done enough research to definitively say that there is or isn't an advantage on whenever you transition. And very much it's going to be, as you're explaining on the spectrum there, sport by sport. And then it's going to be case by case basis too. Because, potentially some trans women were very slender males that never ever lifted anything over 2 kilos in their life. So I think we need to really have a case-by-case analysis of it and a sport-by-sport analysis. And there's just not enough money that goes into that now to understand that at this stage.
And I think TBA are looking to align themselves. I'm not sure if I'm talking a little bit out of school. I've had some stuff to do with TBA trying to get an inclusion policy around trans people. They're trying to align themselves a little with lawn bowls, because lawn bowls has got more competitors, that sort of stuff, and it's coming through for them too. But I think Temper Bowling Australia want to use a lot of the US stuff, because the US have done a little bit of research into to trans athletes over there. So I think they want to try and bring that in. I was hoping we would have that policy for the first of this year. We're not there yet, but we are certainly working towards that. And I think we'll get there. I don't foresee TBA coming to me and saying, "Oh, look, you no longer can," but they could potentially happen. But I don't foresee that happening. I think Rowan and Nathan and other people I've spoken to on TBA are very supportive. I know, as I said, all the competitors I compete against, they're all happy to compete against me. So I think on a case-by-case basis, in my particular case, if the competitors are happy, then the Associo or the governing body should be happy. And then if we want to go through and do I would more than happily subject myself to the testing to try and to show that where I fit. Because as I said, in the middle again. I mean, the middle of the middle.
Yes.
Maybe a bit higher up, but certainly in the middle of the middle when it comes to my physical attributes of 10-pin bowling.
And then I think you compare that to, obviously the men naturally usually score a little bit higher than the ladies in 10-pin bowling, and that's why if that's a mixed division, there's 8 pins handicap given. But I don't think it's definitely not a sport where if you were stronger, you're not necessarily going to get a better result.
No, I don't think so.
And it's not always the way either. And I think that there's plenty of other sports that are like that. I just think we need to understand our sports better and what makes people good at our sports, and then to be able to make a very good determination on that. But I really like that, the governing body's obviously doing some work around trans inclusion, which is super important, because people always say, ignorant people, I call them ignorant people, but they always say they should have their own division. And I'm like, well, what, compete against themselves? Like you're the only, you are the only trans athlete in 10-pin bowling. You don't get better. You're not going to have a competition. There's nothing to compete against if that's the way we go. And, I think that just goes down a very, very bad rabbit hole. And that, we need to work on inclusion rather than different divisions, because that's not going to work.
No, you're right. It isn't going to work. We need to dispel the myths to try and understand the sport. Now, whether the sport has to put in money into that or align themselves with other sports, we need to have some sort of governance around it so that we don't have issues that promoters or other entities can dictate to the athlete whether or not they can compete. Because that really was a very, very difficult time. Like, I had such a great time previous to that. That particular lead up to that, I was stressed and all those sorts of things. And to an extent, I didn't really even enjoy being down there. It wasn't until Rockway was one thing. I was very stressed through that. I still enjoyed it, and even the teams down there we had a great time. They didn't care. It wasn't until I got into the Masters and I started to, I think it steeled me into really making sure I was at my best. And then I qualified quite well. My first day was really, really good, and I knew I was close on the second day. I didn't open the best. I probably got a bit second day nerves, and that does seem to happen a little bit. But then I just hit my straps. And I think I was mentally stronger because of what had happened in the lead up to that.
And I always think, there's some sort of thing that you'll need to get over as an athlete, right? Like, you need to build resilience, and it's unfortunate that was what helped you build resilience. But I think that always shows who's going to come out on top, and like that could have really affected you mentally. And when you're mentally affected, you're not going to perform well. So I think, no matter, when people try and make the argument about physiological and power and all that sort of stuff, that's great. But if mentally you're not there, then it's not going to happen.
And bowling is such a mental sport. Like, you've really got to be mentally tough in 10-pin bowling, especially when the lane conditions get hard and those sorts of things. So your physical game can be perfect, but if your mental game is rubbish, then you're out.
Correct. Correct. But one of the things, you have mentioned about a couple of, bowling in a couple of seniors events, which I think's great. And I understand that the seniors have been very, very welcoming, which again just lights my face up with absolute joy, because I think of the demographic and what they would have grown up at, and the laws that they grew up with, which were very anti-gay and lesbian people, let alone trans people. How does what is that like for you, and how does that make you feel? And
it's great. I mean, I don't know how they felt the very first. I turned up to my first seniors event was at Caboolture last year, which is coming up again this year, and I just turned up. I'm sure the event, by that stage, the event organisers must have known. And some people, there must have been a ripple effect, and some people must have gone, oh. So that must have gone out that I was coming. But everyone was just, well, you're here to bowl. And they just want to get on with and bowl. And, I've upset some of them, but not because I'm trans, but more because I ride the ball too far or whatever. must really, I've got to find that lady and apologise to her. Yeah. Anyway.
You got too much energy on the lanes for them.
Well, if it's the 6-1 and you're riding it 2 lanes, of course. So, you know. So yeah. So, but yeah, I turned up there and there really wasn't any issues at all.
Yep.
Clothing choice was a bit of a problem, but I had tassels on my skirt, which apparently you weren't allowed to do. So, but I fixed that now, and yeah, have made some really, really nice friends down there, and then I go to and compete with and see them, and they come up and say hi and give me a hug and that sort of stuff. So it's really, really good. Bowling has been overall super supportive. They just don't care. They just want to compete. So, and we all compete at a high level. So when you compete with people at a high level, that makes you bowl better. Yes. So, and that's what people want. So, and they want to enjoy themselves. And I certainly, most of the time, enjoy myself when I'm bowling. So I think I am loud, and and I ride the ball and that sort of stuff. And if I'm not doing well, a lot of people know as well. But I think that's people. They enjoy the good of that sort of stuff. Yes. So, and I think they see me as out there having a good time and contributing and that sort of stuff. So I think, that's why it's come from. It's been fairly positive.
Yeah. Well, I think it's always good to watch a competitor too. Yeah. And, riding the highs and the lows, that's definitely a sign of a true competitor. Yeah. And people love watching that. So I'm sure that's probably part of it too, even though, saying might be a bit loud and that sort of thing. Yeah, I've always thought that, especially being very loud myself.
No one would say that about you.
No, not at all. Shy and very quiet and reserved
exactly
are 3 words that I get often, that's for sure.
Yeah, I can well imagine.
I know there was, you're coming up and you made the final of the Australian Masters, I believe.
Yeah, step-ladder final.
Step-ladder final, yeah. And also, now last year's New South Wales Open, you're in the final for the top 2 there. Yeah. Jamie sort of commented and being like at those moments getting a little uneasy himself. Like obviously he wants you to do well, and it's not a thought that he wants to have, but it's in around like if you win and if you're doing really, really well, is that going to end up being bad for you and end up having negative thoughts? So does that come into your mind at all? And I mean, it shouldn't happen. We know that. And I'm not saying that it's right or anything like that. But are there thoughts there, when you're getting down and you're like, well, I'd win this? Is there thoughts of like that could potentially upset the apple cart with how supportive people are?
No, at the time, no.
Yep.
In the Masters, Australian Masters, I wasn't thinking about that at all.
Yep.
All I was thinking, I remember cutting, and Michael, my coach, Michael Craig, was crook as, and I rang him after I'd made the cut, and I was crying. I was in tears. At that point, I felt very isolated. I think that was for a number of reasons, mostly because of what had gone on beforehand, but also because there was a few other bits and pieces that had gone on that day, and I just felt very isolated. And I rang him crying and said, look, I really do need you to come down and watch. And to his credit, him and Jared did, his partner, and they came down and supported me, which is really, really lovely. And once I got myself together, I didn't think about anything. All I was thinking about was concentrating on my bowling and doing well. I wanted to win. I didn't even think about what might happen if I did. I just wanted to. And I think that's anyone who makes a final in any sport, they don't think about the repercussions afterwards. Yep. What might happen, they just want to win at the time. Same with New South Wales Open. Like, I knew where I was on that day, and it became apparent that I was actually bowling really well that day. So then, I'm going to butcher her name. Sian and her and I were doing really, really well and close, and Beck was obviously miles in front.
Yep.
So I came up against Sian, and unfortunately, or fortunately for me, unfortunately for her, it pretty much came down to one single pin in the last game for her in our match that she missed. that let me win.
Yep.
And then that got me into the final. So, so I was really concentrating on really trying to win. I wanted to win. I had no thoughts of, if I win, people are going to say?
Yeah.
Maybe if I had one, I'd reflect on that. But I think the fact that I've now competed on such a high level in both those two tournaments, that thought process could be there anyway. It's not, she didn't win, but she's there and she has a potential to win these events. So coming third or second was irrelevant really in the conversation. It's the fact that she's there competing. She has that potential. So that conversation's probably already started. I still haven't heard anything negative in relation to that. But again, living in Canberra, we're probably a bit isolated towards that. But, I think, I really believe that I've got a lot of support and they don't really care.
Yep.
If I win, well, I was the winner on the day. So, and if I don't win, well, I contributed and I was a competitor on the day. So I don't think they don't see me as who I was. They just see me as another girl on the lanes. Doing her best to try and win. So, and
I think I haven't heard anything to all of the female competitors' credit. Like I haven't heard anything negative from them at all. I probably don't seem like the most open person for them to speak poorly about anything of anyone in our community. But again, you hear things when you walk through bowling centres and that sort of thing. So I haven't heard anything to their credit, which is great. And I do think that they actually sort of revel in the challenge. At least we've got another high performing female that we are going to go up against.
Yeah, exactly.
So I think, particularly, unfortunately, bowling was great in the 90s and huge in the 90s. It's not as big as it used to be. So the female scene is quite small. So I think that, just having someone else there to stir the pot and for them to go up against has been actually welcomed by them, and they've opened,
I think so too.
Greeted it with open arms.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, the start of last year, I wasn't competing very well at all. Like I was really struggling on the national tour. So it wasn't until the last two events that I sort of hit my straps. So hopefully I'll be a bit better this year.
It seems like, you've said it yourself, you're a lot happier within who you are as a person. And I always think, and probably your evidence of it too, that when you feel better within yourself, you perform better as an athlete. Do you look back at the days and go, potentially I would have done better as a trans athlete at a younger age? Or I know you don't have regrets because of the life you built, but
potentially, because I find it easier now to deal with when I'm not bowling well than I used to. When I was before transition, if I wasn't bowling well, it was gone. Whereas now, when I'm learning more, I'm more relaxed in what I'm doing. We all have bad days when I can't get it back, but mostly now I can have a couple of bad games and go, all right, I make some adjustments, get my head right, and come back. So, so there's those sorts of positives out of it. So I think I would have competed at a more high level had I transitioned a lot earlier. Yes, I do think that. I think I would have been mentally tougher and mentally more at ease with myself than having those internal struggles with, I was always trying to hide bits and pieces before, whereas now I don't have to hide anything. So
that's awesome. Have you got any advice for anyone that is sitting there and thinking that they might be trans, or for any trans athletes?
If you're trans and you're in and you speak to people, because all the people that you think care don't. They don't care at the fact that you're trans. They just want you happy. So if you are sitting there thinking, should I, shouldn't I want to do this, then do it. Go and see someone, speak to a psychologist, get on the right track, and start the journey, start the process. Because at least then you won't have those years of worrying or wondering, should I have done it earlier or anything. I've done it now, and now this is what I want to do. And then you can take your time, but at least you're making that first step. And as they say in everything, your first step's the hardest one. So once you make that first step, after that, they all just flow on. So
Excellent. Madeline, thank you so much for your time today.
My pleasure.
Been awesome talking to you,
Thank you
and been great to have you back for the first podcast of 2024.
Thank you very much.
No worries. And thank you all for listening. Can't thank Madeline enough for being so open and honest and letting us into some of those raw emotions that she would have been feeling in her transitioning journey. One of the key themes that's coming out of this Out Athlete series is the need for us to be, and our out athletes to be role models for society. Now, it's not something that necessarily that they are choosing to do or actively choosing to do. It's more bestowed upon them, or they feel like they need to. I know if we go back to Jamie's episode, it was much about keeping that team, the Pride Monarchs, up to a higher standard because we needed to, because of the people involved in it. All of our athletes that were in that team, he felt like were being held to a higher standard. And then I was chat with Madeline, and it sort of came through in my sit down with her, but it was more before I started pressing record. And it was like, I didn't really set out to be a trailblazer, or I didn't really set out to be that role model for anybody, but I've sort of gone into this position now where I'm being successful, I'm out in the open, and now I really want to pave the way for other trans athletes. So I think it's really important, and one of those key issues that I just really want to hit on in this Out Athlete series is, and it's part of the reason that some people stay in the closet, is because they don't want to take on a public role model status. They just want to be who they are. Anyway, that was my final thought for today. We will catch you next time on the podcast, but thank you again for listening to Our Pride by Mr Gay Pride Australia. I am Mr Gay Pride Australia 2022. Hard to put that into, I've got to think about what year it is now, but Mr Gay Pride Australia 2022, Dion Alexander. As always, if you can, please rate and review the podcast. We would love it. 5-star reviews are what we ask for. If you have any feedback, you want to get yourself on the podcast, or you know someone that would be great on the podcast, please send us a DM. Also, one final thing. As always, if this episode has hit home, or you know someone that it would be very beneficial to send to, please send them the link. We would love for this podcast to grow. We're trying to create a safe space, and if you can help us do that, it would be very much appreciated. Until next time, be real.